Hello, Sunflower Nation. It is wonderful to see you and speak with you all again. As you know, my name is Dr. Edith Banks, founder of the Sunflower Nation, and many of you have reached out to find out where I have been the last couple months, and I have sadly, as many of you know, been dealing with the transition of my father. My father did pass in July after a long illness this year. And so I really thought about how to reintegrate myself back into the podcast and into speaking as a whole. And one of the guests that we had lined up for our season 2 actually lost her husband after recording her episode and asked that we do a series on grief and loss. And so we wanted to honor her request. She will be one of our speakers throughout the course of the series. But I really wanted to start with a really special friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Caron Cox. Caron and I completed our doctoral journey together. So she is very near and dear to my heart. And she's going to share with us her experience with losing her mom and what makes this even more, I don't want to say impactful because any loss is impactful, but what has this particular story resonate with me is because Caron lost her mom, I believe the week before starting our doctoral program. And so she is a survivor. She is an awesome woman. And I thought it fitting that we come into the world through our mothers, that we start the first story discussing the loss of a mother. So, Caron, first of all, thank you so much for being part of the Sunflower Nation. Thank you for your willingness to share this really intimate part of your life with us. And, as we, go through the questions and have a conversation, if there's anything that becomes a little bit uncomfortable for you, we can pause, we can pass on a question. This is really an opportunity for you to share your story, but also to honor your mom. So welcome,
Girl,
Caron.
I'm already all teary-eyed. I brought the tissues, didn't think I was gonna need them in the first 3 minutes. Ooh, all right. Thanks for having
And so
me.
people
Thank
did
you.
caution me against doing this so soon after the loss of my dad.
Me being one of them.
Yes, but of course, you all know I don't listen so well. And my mission in life is that if it can help somebody else, then it's worth it, even if I have to struggle through it. So I'm going for it. And I have my tissues too. So we're going to do what we need to
We'll
do.
be strong for each other. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Caron, tell us a little bit about yourself, but also tell us about the relationship you had with your mom.
My name is Dr. Caron Cox, and as Edith, described, we did go through the doctoral journey together. My mother and I'm the firstborn, and the difference in age between myself and my younger sister is 7 years. So I almost sort of kind of grew up as an only child, so to speak, for 7 years. And so my mother and I were very, very close. In my adult years, we talked at least 3 to 4 times a day. Beginning first thing in the morning, I would call her while I was walking my dog before I went to work. I'd wake her up sometimes, but I'm like, "Are you sleeping?" No. We were really, really very close. And so much so that when I bought my house, she actually found my house for me. And when I bought my house, I literally lived less than 2 blocks away from her. That's just how close we are. And then my sister lives 2 blocks away from me. So we're like, within
Tight-knit family there.
2-mile radius of each other. Yeah. My mother is a very special woman. So much so that at her funeral, my sister and I decided that we would wear her favorite color. And we asked all of our girlfriends, because my mother was a mother to everyone, right? We were generous in sharing her with our closest friends. Like, that's just who she was to everyone. Like, there are people who call me and they're like, I miss your mom so much. I'm like, yeah, thanks. Because she was that person for everyone. So, her girls, as we call them, all wore white, just to identify who they were, because they were very special to her as well. So she was a huge, huge, huge piece of not just my life, but a lot of people's lives. And so she's sorely missed.
How long ago did your mom pass, and how old was she?
So my mom died on August 5th, 2020. So we just celebrated the 3 years of her transition. She was 70. She was a hardworking woman. She had literally just retired from a second career. And really, it was almost a forced retirement because of the pandemic. And so she, at the time, was a church administrator in a historic church on Long Island, an Episcopal church on Long Island. And because the churches were closed and that we were unsure at that time when we were reopening, and they had been closed for so long, her and her boss made kind of a mutual agreement that she would retire, and she was excited. So she retired in June of 2020. And she was just excited to be able to, she had a green thumb. So, like, to help me plant flowers in my house, and to help my sister with her vegetable garden, and to just do whatever she wanted to do. She loved to travel. So she had, a plan to go to Africa. She had tried to go to Africa 3 times. The first time she ended up pregnant with me, so she had to cancel that one. The next one, there was like some civil unrest. And so this time she was really excited to take this trip to Africa, which was going to be her birthday month, which it was in May, for her 75th birthday. But, she never got to see that.
I'm sorry. If you're comfortable, can you tell us about how your mom transitioned? Did she have an illness? Was it a sudden passing?
So, the weekend, it was over the weekend. So that weekend we were celebrating a friend of mine's 50th birthday. And so we had gotten a small, like, sprinter type bus and went out to the vineyards. A small group of us, made sure everyone was COVID tested, wore a mask, the whole 9 yards, but we wanted to celebrate her 50th birthday. And so my mom was always the person who we would go to, because she had everything. And I was like, Mom, do you have a basket that we could put, champagne glasses in? Because, we had like beverages for the ride out east. So we went over there, got all of the stuff. Okay, great. Had a wonderful time. The next day, I went to go return the basket to her. And so I had my best friend who lives in Atlanta. We've been best friends since first grade. And I had her sister in the car with me. And my mom came to the door, and I, handed her the stuff. And I was like, thank you so much. And she's like, what you guys doing? What's up for the weekend? What you guys doing? And I said, we're thinking about going to the beach tomorrow. The beach was my mother's special place. My mother was born in Aruba. She grew up in Aruba. And I said, we're thinking about going to the beach. She said, which beach? So I said, well, we're going to go to Rockaway Beach. She's like, that's not a real beach. I don't want to go. Right. So we laughed. Ha ha ha. That's the last conversation that I had with my mom. I left. At that time, we weren't hugging or kissing or doing any of that, because it was the height of the pandemic still. And so I left, and my friends and I went back to my house, and then we went out. And while we were out, my niece called me. My niece at the time was 12. She might have been 12, 11 or 12. She called me, and she's screaming in the phone. And I'm like, I need you to slow down. I can't understand what you're saying. And she's yelling in the phone something about, she used to call my mother Oma. She's like, something happened to Oma, but I couldn't really understand what she was saying. And then she hung up the phone. So I'm calling her back and she's not picking up the phone. So then she sent me a text message that said, like, something's wrong with Oma. So finally, once I got her on the phone, she said, the ambulance is here. Come to find out, my sister and my niece, a few hours after I left, had gone over and my mother was cooking meatballs because she knew that her meatballs were my best friend's favorite meal. So she was fixing meatballs, and my sister and my niece were there, and she had a strange look on her face and just went down. She just collapsed. And so my sister, provided CPR and kind of like tried to get her going and told my niece to call the ambulance. So the ambulance came and took her to our nearby hospital. We met her there. And at that time, they didn't know what was going on. And I think she had gained a little bit of consciousness. She was in and out of consciousness, but we didn't know what was going on. And so finally, they figured out that she had a rupture. She was hemorrhaging on her brain. She had a ruptured brain aneurysm, which for me was almost comforting. Strange, right? Like, but it was comforting for me because I'm a ruptured brain aneurysm survivor, right? So I was like, oh, been there, done that. We know what this is. We know what this is, right? You guys gonna take her to the next hospital for surgery? Like, what are we doing, right? Because we knew, like, we've been through this before.
Right.
And so they ambulanced her to the next hospital, where they performed surgery. And the next day, so we were there. We spent, each night with her. And the next day they had a meeting with the social worker and the surgeon and my sister and I. And they said, you need to call people to come and say their goodbyes. I was like, say their goodbyes? Like, what are you talking about? It had been a couple of days and her brain activity, they had done the surgery. At first they started asking us about, like, mobile, like, are there steps in the house? Like, so we're thinking like, okay, so maybe there's going to be some, physical, things that she may not be able to do, that she'll get there, but like, we have to make some arrangements for the house and whatever. But then it turned into like, yeah, she's not coming back. And that was the second time in my life that I had a complete anxiety attack. I felt a numbness come from my toes and it was creeping up my body to the point where it hijacked my mouth and I couldn't speak. And I was trying to speak and I could not. And my sister's sitting next to me and she's crying and I'm not crying. I can't say anything. So I'm telling them like I could not talk. I tried everything and it just, my mouth would not move. And they called in someone and they started doing like some like mindfulness, like breathing techniques with me. They asked me to drink water. My hands were like this, like I couldn't close my hands. I had no real control over my body. And it was the scariest thing. But just the idea that I was laughing with my mom and now just like that, she's not here was, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't even have words.
How soon after the surgery and them having that conversation with you did she transition?
So it was a little complicated because she, she had the breathing tubes and all of that. And so she had never regained consciousness and you could see that there was no brain activity. And so they kept her for 2 days. On the second night, they basically said to us, like, you're going to have to make a decision. We can either move her to palliative care or you can basically pull the plug. And we were like, pull the plug. Like, we're not, nobody's giving up on her. Like, God has the last word and she's going to be fine. Um, and then it took us a few hours. We called people. So people started to come, to visit. There was a very popular woman. And they pulled us back in the room again and said, like, you guys really, you need to make a decision. And sister and I, was the first time that we ever communicated with our eyes. And we looked at each other and we just knew, like, all right, we're going to do it. But we didn't end up having to, because the doctors kind of felt our hesitance. And so they said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do certain tests. And those tests will, if she doesn't respond to these tests, we'll have to declare her brain dead. And in New York State, when you're declared brain dead, like, basically you're gone, yeah. You're deceased. And so that kind of took the burden off of us, to have to live with the fact that, like, there was a maybe. And so they did that. And I want to say, like, they declared her at like 1:00 in the morning. My sister, my niece, and myself, went in the room and held her hand and told her how much we loved her, and, promised her that we would be okay. And we witnessed her take her last breath. That was, it was crazy, because we had spent months during the pandemic trying to keep her safe, right? Like, I'm huggy, huggy, kissy, kissy, like, kind of, okay, mommy, trying to stay away, bringing her groceries. She would try to sneak out the house and go to the supermarket because she wanted sardines or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Trying to keep her safe. And so I went all of those months not hugging my mom and not having the opportunity to ever, like, hug her and smell her and feel her again. And so that was hard. It was hard. And we were in the middle of a pandemic, right? So then that's the other piece.
That's my next question is, whenever you hear somebody passed in 2020, everybody assumes it's COVID related. And clearly that's not the situation with your mom. And when you think of, what a traditional burial service looks like, during COVID, there was no such thing as traditional. How were you able to navigate that part of the process?
So, my mother was one of those people, like, I'm not always going to be here, but don't worry, because when I go, you're going to have a whole plan on what to do. I wrote out everything, what song, she would tell us that she had this whole thing planned out. Well, we never found that. But we knew her well enough to know, or at least we thought we knew her well enough to plan something that was befitting the queen that she was. And so I contacted a friend of mine and my mother loved this guy too, loved him very much. And he is a funeral director. So I called him and I said to him, you can't leave her in that morgue. You need to pick her up. She can't stay there in that hospital, in that cold morgue. Like, bring her to you, right? So he did. And he contacted my mother. My mother was a member of a large church here in our area for many, many years, an active member. And we went to them and they told us that we could only have, I think it was 40 people in the sanctuary, with a 10-minute viewing and a 20-minute funeral, or, whatever the rules were at that time. And we said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. She deserves better than that. And so we ended up having it at another church. It was jam-packed in there. When I say jam-packed, we also had it on live streamed on Zoom for her friends and the elderly and people who couldn't make it. My parents got divorced, I guess about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. So my dad is in Florida now. And so he can view it. Like, we made sure that everyone was able to view it. And it's interesting because the church administrators were like, we're going to get shut down. Like, we're going to get in trouble. And so my sister and I said, we said to them, we go, you see those guys behind us in the back with the white shirts on? They're the people who would come and shut you down. They're not shutting you down, right? Because when you are a good person and you're good to people and you know people in high places, they make sure that you're good,
That's a
right?
blessing. That is definitely a blessing.
It absolutely, absolutely was. And so we then had the repast. It was a beautiful service. We had the repast at her house in her backyard, which was another, listen, we hadn't all been together in months, but we came together for her. And anybody who was like, can I hug you? I was like, yep. Yep, bring it in. Hug it, hug me, hug me, hug me. Yeah. So it was a beautiful celebration of her life. And I don't, as far as her, I mean, other than not being able to have it in a place where she dedicated so many years of service, time and energy and resources, I don't regret a thing with her homegoing service. We really were just blessed in being able to celebrate it in that way at that time.
Right. Right.
So
The beginning of our conversation, we talked about our doctoral journey, and this happened shortly before you started the program. Tell us about that. How did you navigate that? Starting this new part of your life that is extremely challenging and taxing and exhausting. I feel like I'm still recovering while you're going through the process of grieving your mom.
So let's backtrack a little bit, because hindsight is 2020, and I've now had the time and opportunity to replay everything in my mind, right? So typically the St. John Fisher program begins in May, right? Begins in May. Because of the pandemic, they pushed us back to August. I think that was by design. I can't say that God orchestrated. I'm not going to say that he orchestrated all of that just for me, but
he's always moving things without us knowing. And it's not till we sit back and we reflect, we can really say, oh my goodness, like,
yes.
Yeah.
And so we buried my mom. I want to say it was like August 12th. And the following week or week and a half, we started the program.
August 26th.
And I had actually not been keeping up with all of the emails and things that we were supposed to do. So I didn't realize that there were things that I needed to do to be able to be there in person. Right. So that's why I was the only one that was on Zoom. Everyone else was in person on that very first day. And the director of the program had called me and said, when I explained to her what happened, she said, I'm so sorry. She goes, do you want to put off the program and maybe start the following year? And I said, absolutely not. Because like, what exactly am I going to do? I'm going to sit around and just like cry. I don't mind as the devil's workshop, right? Like I'm the type of person that has to, Charmaine says that I'm a runner, I'm a track star. Cause I'm constantly on the go, because that's what fuels me. And so I think the program in hindsight is exactly what I needed at the time when I needed it, with the people that I needed it with. I think that it sustained me in a way that I didn't know I needed. It sustained me in a way. Like I didn't know that I needed it in that way. And so what did I do? I grieved through it. I quietly grieved through it. Like you never saw me in the corner crying, right? But I was, I did my best and I pushed through, because I knew that, my mother was very a very strong proponent of education. And I knew that she was worried about me. She had been very, very clear about worried about me being able to handle the workload, coupled with my demanding job workload, coupled with, you know, there are some very invisible, Leslie from our class always talks about invisible disabilities. So there are some very invisible disabilities that people will say to me, no, you don't have, but I do. And I work super
Really
hard to compensate for them as a result of the damage I experienced to my brain, right? And so that program was challenging, but it was even more challenging for me for a multitude of reasons. So I knew that I just needed to do it. After our first class, my mother was my biggest cheerleader. And after our first class, we were on Zoom. And I remember I couldn't get to the leave this meeting button fast enough because I couldn't keep it together. Like I was literally in shambles, crying like hysterically, because I knew that the first call that I would have made after I finished my first course in my doctoral program would have been my mom.
Of course.
And so there were just so many firsts that not just me, but like my sister, my niece, that we had to experience without her. And I think experiencing the first of everything, it's a process. And even once you start to feel like you feel better, then you feel bad that you feel better. Like, why do I feel better? Right?
I get it. I get it.
And it's nuts because even, anyone who knows me knows I'm a daddy's girl, right? My sister and my mother were like this. My mother and I were very close, but my younger sister is my mother's baby, and I'm a daddy's girl. But you don't know what life is like without your mother. Think about it. Like, what is life without your mother? You don't know. Your father is an ancillary outside part of you. It's almost like losing a limb.
Right.
See,
yeah.
And I'm a daddy's girl, right? So thank God my father, that's a whole other piece of the story, because he went through a lot of physical, things during my recovery during the aneurysm. But he's still alive and well. But what is life without your mother?
Tell us, what is life without your mom now?
People are like, you're the matriarch of the family now. I'm like, what? What are you talking about, matriarch? Nobody's matriarch. There's a definite extra level of responsibility. I don't have children, but I do take on the responsibility of making sure that my niece and my sister are good. Even more so than they probably even recognize. Having to figure things out for myself, because my mother was like, all right, Ma, what should I do? This is what's going on. What do you think? And she'd come up with an answer. If I needed something, I'd go to Mom Mart, right? She had it all, whatever I needed, she had extra.
Mom Mart, I love that.
Yeah. And so it's really hard. And it's really hard now, picking up the pieces of, some of the things that she used to manage by herself that we didn't really know, because she just did. She just did. And she didn't complain. She just did. So
how do you feel like losing your mom impacted your relationships? And in all different capacities, not necessarily just romantic relationships or sibling relationships, just in general.
So I definitely have rolled back some of my accessibility because I've always been a social butterfly with, thousands groups of friends and, this and that. And just, I love to be outside. I love, you know, going out to dinners and traveling and hanging out. And my mother would always say to me, like, Caron, you need to spend some time with yourself. Again, I don't know what I was running from. But she would always tell me, like, Caron, spend some time with yourself. And so her voice telling me that I need to spend time with myself as I get older rings in my ear a whole lot more. And so I do. I've made my home my sanctuary, and I enjoy spending time with myself because I know that at the end of the day, that's all you have. As far as relationships, I can't really say that it has changed relationships in that way. I think losing my mother has forced me to enjoy my life in a different kind of way than I have in the past, because you recognize that, like, life is short. One minute you're laughing and joking with someone, and the next minute they're gone. And that can happen to anybody. It can happen to any one of us. And so rather than wait to enjoy my life, I need to make time to do that now. My mother waited her entire life to go to Africa. That's what she wanted to do. And she never made it. We actually made a promise to her, my sister, my niece, and I, that we would take that trip. And
So I was
so
about to ask you, when you going? When are you
soon,
going?
soon. We have not, we're thinking maybe 2025, 24, 25, because it really has to be something that's well planned out. Like,
Right.
And so either 24 or 25, I think, will be the pilgrimage. Because we did make that promise to her. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Do you feel like losing your mom had any effect on you professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the helping profession. I am a school administrator, but I run the clinical department, so I supervise the counselors and clinicians. I think my mother's loss has helped me to become more, I won't say empathetic, because that's who I am. I'm a compassionate person, but I think that it's helped me to see things from a different lens for people. Um, it just gives you, I think losing a parent in general, it gives you a different lens for life. And so it's definitely helped me. It's helped me to help other people process grief. Because until then, like, my mother's mother passed away 20 years ago, but like, grandparents are old. Like, right, as a child, like,
That's what
grandparents
you,
are old.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that, right? Like, you expect that your parents are gonna live forever, but like, grandparents, like, you were always old. I met you were old, right? I mean, I'm just joking, but like, that's an expectation that your grandparents are
Right.
not going to live, through your adult life. I'm blessed to have my grandfather still alive. He's 95. My grandmother passed 2 years ago. She was 92. So like, but that's not the norm, right?
Right.
But before then, I had never really experienced real grief up front and personal, a loss that close. And so it gives me a different lens. Like, it helps me to understand young people who are 14 and 16 that lose their parents. It just gives you a different lens. And so I don't take that for granted at all. And I also appreciate every lesson that my mother taught me, both verbally and non-verbally. And those things have transcended through my life, both personally and professionally. Like, little things like how to properly clean a house. Because then when I walk into my office and I'm like, guys, you didn't clean in the corner. What are these dust bunnies in the corner? The floor looks nice and shiny, but there's dust bunnies in the corner. You didn't really clean, right? Like things like that, like how to manage a checkbook, how to make $1 out of 15 cents. Like she taught us so many important lessons, how to maintain a house, and like things like what do you need in a new roof look like other than waiting for water to be dripping in your ceiling. You know what I mean? Like she taught us things like that nobody really taught her, because she kind of raised herself. And so I'm just very, very appreciative of her choosing me and me choosing her, right? To live this life together for the time that we had.
What was your biggest fear after your mom passed?
My biggest fear was that the aneurysms were genetic. And so I forced my sister and my niece to get tested. And what's interesting about that is the insurance companies were fighting them and did not want to pay for the testing. But two people make a pattern. One person maybe not, but two people, right, that's a pattern, right? And I also went in for some testing as well to make sure that everything was good with me. So once I got that bill of health for the two of them, not even for myself, like for the two of them, that was my sigh of relief, because that was my biggest fear. Like, I can't lose another person to this. And aneurysms are something that really are preventable. Ruptures, they're preventable. They're preventable if people know the signs, if hospitals are quick to act, if insurance companies would invest in preventative measures as opposed to reactive interventions, more people can live, right? So
when you think about your grieving process, and I'm not even going to say what that was, because I'm sure you're still grieving. What does that look like from day to day?
I don't know what I would do if I didn't have such a close relationship with God. My prayer life has double, tripled, and quadrupled in power through this experience, because he's revealed certain things to me. And I don't want to come off sounding like a religious zealot, right? But like literally there are things that I now understand. I feel this, they say the word says a peace that surpasses all understanding. I feel that peace. And he comforts those who mourn, right? And so I really feel comforted in the word of God. And I think that has helped me tremendously. I think connecting with people who have also lost parents, because the one thing that I did do, I have close friends who have lost, parents. And I called each and every one of them and I said, I'm so sorry. Like, I thought that me bringing you this bucket of chicken, right, and a bottle of wine, like, girl, I got you. I'm here. That I was doing what you needed, but I didn't know. Like, you don't know until you become a part of this club that nobody wants to be a part of. You don't know what a person, and I mean, things are going to change from time to time, but you just don't know what someone is going to need. And so I actually apologized to them. I said, I'm sorry. And each of them was like, girl, how you supposed to know? How are you supposed to know? Like, you think that you're there for someone, but like, is that really what they need?
And it's different for everyone.
And it's different for everyone. And it's different for everyone, but it's important to meet people where they are. And so there is no cookie cutter, like when your mother dies, you do this, and when your father dies, you do that for your friend. Like,
Right.
no, but you meet people where they are and you ask them, girl, do you need anything? I know you're going to say no, but do you need anything? If you change your mind, I'm here. If you are crying at 2 o'clock in the morning, I might be knocked out, but call me.
Mhm.
Right? Like, because you just don't know what people need.
Right.
And what I found is you find comfort in the people you least expect it from.
Yes. Yeah.
You find the love and the comfort and the things that you need from the people that you would least expect it from. And you have to be open to receive it. Sounds like you can relate to that.
Definitely. 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 So my last question for you is, if you could have one final conversation with your mom, what would you talk about? What would you want to tell her?
That's loaded. When I had to write my mother's obituary, I actually realized how little I knew about her life. Like, I knew her, but there were a lot of things that I didn't know about her life. And so I had to call her close friends and piece it together. I didn't know how old she was when she came to this country. I didn't know when she moved from Aruba to Grenada. I didn't like, there were so many things about her life that I didn't know. And then that caused me, because as the investigator and the clinical brain that I have, it caused me to start to think about why she wasn't transparent about her life. So then so it was like a snowball effect. So then that hurts me even more, because how could you have been in that much pain and not want to talk about your life? Right? And then that helps me to then understand why she made certain decisions or moved in certain ways, because of the way she was raised and the things that she experienced or didn't have the opportunity to experience. And so, you know, our conversation would be like, help me fill in the blank. I saw something on social media one day that said, it was like a list of like questions to ask your mom before it's too late, basically. Like conversation starters. Like, what's your favorite memory of me?
Mm.
What were your hopes and dreams for me? What are they now? What thing did I do that made you the most proud? Right? And there are all of these questions that I'll never get an answer to. So I'm just going to continue to try to keep doing things that I think would make her proud, right? Or I tell my sister all the time, I tell everyone, you have children, keep a journal. And you don't have to write every day, right? But like, write things. They do something funny, they do something that upsets you, they do something that's amazing, surprising, whatever. Jot it down. Jot down things of your life. Today I woke up and went outside on the beach and sat and watched the sunrise. How beautiful, you know, God's creation is. Because eventually they're gonna find it and they're gonna read it. And that's a memorial, a testament, a testimony to who you were as a woman, as a mother, as a friend, as a lover. Um, I've found some of those things around my mom's house, but more so like things about her and her life, like not so much about like me or my sister, but like what a beautiful thing would that would be for your child to eventually find that,
Yeah.
So that's my recommendation, but that's what our conversation would be. Like I want to know like you know, like what do you think about? What do you think of me now? What are your thoughts? What do you think my next move should be?
Well, what I think, what I think your mom would say is that she is extremely proud of you, that you continue to make her proud. You have surpassed anything she imagined for you, and that you better plan that trip to Africa.
Oh, it's happening for sure. It's gonna happen.
But I
It's
thank
gonna
you so
happen.
much um, for sharing your mom with us.
Thank
I
you.
think it's a private thing, and you opened yourself up, and you were willing, and I'm so appreciative. And I know that your story is going to resonate so much with other people. Um, I lost my dad, but so much of what you said, I'm like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Writing the
And
obituary was like, I called my uncle. I never knew my dad was a teacher.
this is what I'm saying.
I never knew my dad was a teacher.
This is what I'm saying. Like you never thought about mentioning that when I was sitting down struggling with my little math homework. You never thought
Right?
about mentioning the fact that you were a teacher. Like, come on. My mother was a
But
hairstylist for a while, and I did know that because she had like all of her hot curlers and the set of rollers and so she worked in a shop for a little while. So I did know that about her, but like there were a lot of things that I just didn't know that I would have loved to know. you know and I think the other thing that I want to mention before we go is I've had friends who have lost parents after long illnesses, and then parents who like mine just basically like drop dead. I think that the trauma is different but the same,
yeah, I've
right?
experienced both. I've experienced both. My godmother, who really raised me,
Yeah.
when she passed, and it's been about 16 years since she passed, and she passed suddenly. And it was so traumatizing that one day she went for a mammogram, then all of a sudden she fell, she her brain was damaged, they did a surgery, she was brain dead, and it was just like, what? She went in for a mammogram, and then you know versus my father, who was extremely ill for 6 months, from January 1st to July 2nd. He was extremely ill. And I thought my father would be easier to cope with, because I kept saying, "Oh, I've been grieving since January." My father hasn't been the same since January, so I've been grieving the loss of my father since January, but I had no idea what I was talking about then, because I could still go see him, I could still hold his hand, I could still, it wasn't the same,
Yeah.
but there's a difference between being gone and being there, just in a different capacity. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I thank you so much, Caron, for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me, Edith.
To my listeners, you are grieving right now the loss of anyone. Um, I pray for your comfort during these trying times. And like I said, my godmother passed 17 years ago. There's not a day that has gone by in 17 years that I have not thought of her. And so I won't say that it gets easier. I don't believe that it ever does, is my personal opinion. I believe that we learn how to cope with it. So may your hearts be filled with the brightest of sunflowers, even on the cloudiest of days, because it will be sunny again. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.